Hey, Steve. Hello.
Hi, mate. How are you?
Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Happy to be here.
I'm not going to lie, I kind of struggled to prep for this and try and fit it all in an hour because you've got so much experience in the fintech space from different points of view. Do you want to give people a little bit of background as to what you've done in your career and, yeah, tell people what you find it?
Yeah, sure. I've worked in foreign exchange and cross-border payments for 25 years, I guess. Most recently, of most interest, I think, I co-founded CurrencyCloud, or the business that would become CurrencyCloud. We launched that in 2009. And yeah, the idea was we'd create a cross-border payments business in the wake of the financial crisis, and get the proposition stood up, and if we can catch the next economic cycle, we'd create meaningful value and an exit event as the economy came back to us post financial crisis. How hard can that be? Turns out it was really hard. But anyway, we'll get into the journey of that later, I'm sure. But no, so co-founded CurrencyCloud in 2009, which we sold to Visa at the end of 21 for unicorn valuation, which was not the original plan, but a very, very happy byproduct. More recently, I'm now partner at Volution Ventures. We invest in technology businesses, particularly fintech and enterprise software organisations. Organisations that are driving efficiency in the capital markets and productivity in the workplace, things like AI and automated technology like that. We invest post-Series A, helping founders with our operational experience and helping them go faster.
Amazing, amazing. It's also interesting, and we can get into this later, how you've switched from a very deep operator to VC as well, and there's probably some things that the audience would love to hear around that. But what was it like in 2009, in and around the time of the financial crisis, also pre-fintech in its kind of, it was pre kind of the era of fintech. It was before fintechs were like
Fintech
legitimately or yeah,
no,
exactly.
I'd come from I'd come from having a meaningful position of responsibility at a company called HIFX, which then went on to sell to Euronet and reversed into xe.com. And the thing about founding a business is once you get over that whole Richard Branson screw it, let's do it moment, you just dive in, and then there's always the first day of right, okay, so let's get on with this, and the silence is deafening. You go from being an important person in the role where you're constantly getting phone calls or a request for help, request for something, and people take your call, to being in an environment where it's exciting, exhilarating, terrifying, and the silence is deafening all at the same time, and not only do the phone calls to you stop, but people stop taking your phone calls. And I'm just trying to build a business here, but it's you've got to be a bit of a glutton for punishment building a business. I think Elon Musk always likens it to staring into the abyss whilst chewing glass. It's one of the hardest things, if not the hardest thing you can do. And you have to be very, very clear on what you're trying to achieve, and you have to be aligned with your co-founders and colleagues that this is going to be hard and we're going to fight for it. So I remember our first office. We were in a forgotten, dark, dank, damp, windowless basement that was given to us for free, blessedly, by one of our investors. They had this storeroom in a basement that they said that you can park yourselves there if it helps. And during the winter months, we felt like pit ponies because you're getting up early and you're getting into the office early and you're finishing late. So during the winter when it's dark outside, we didn't see. I could go weeks without seeing. Well, certainly during the week, wouldn't see daylight, which was challenging. But yes, pre-fintech, we didn't really know what we were calling ourselves, and in fact, at that point, we were still kind of turning up to the office in suits, because the whole fintech revolution hadn't really started then. And Nigel was an ex-banker, I was an ex-broker, so kind of, and then as the first couple of years progressed, we moved into our second office and we took on a proper head of marketing, actually, the first one, and he tapped into this whole new finance zeitgeist that was going around at the time. This is 2011, I think it was, and then fintech was an expression that got coined in around 2012, I think it was, just as companies like TransferWise were coming through. Of course, Revolut didn't come through until a couple of years later, but we engaged with both those guys when there were nothing more than business plans, so it was kind of fun to be there at the beginning of the whole movement, actually, or just before the beginning.
It's very, very cool. And yeah, being in a dark basement isn't typically on LinkedIn posts when people are starting.
They stay behind every overnight success or behind $1 billion valuation. There is like 15 years of grind.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
What pulled you through? You and your team. Yeah. What pulled you through in those moments? And in that deafening silence, as you describe it, such a good way of putting it.
I think it's blind optimism. I think, as any entrepreneur will tell you, and I'm sure David would resonate with this actually. If you're not glass half full, then you've got no business trying. You need to have a healthy, well, borderline unhealthy curiosity, and challenge. Why is it done this way? Why does it have to be like that? You know, you're like a child. Why? But the thing that gets you through, you obviously need a huge amount of energy, huge amount of stamina, and a desire to do things differently, and a belief that you can make things better. And the thing that we were addressing in the early days. I'd just come out of HIFX actually in 2006, and I went on to set up a headhunting business. Don't ever do that; it was an awful business. But when I left HIFX in 2006, I was of the opinion that the brokerage market was the cross-border payments market, which was brokerage based. It was service based at that point, pre the technology arms race. I felt it was saturated. And it wasn't until 2 years later when I got approached by a mutual friend to have a meeting with Nigel, who would go on to co-found CurrencyCloud together. He had this great idea of using this thing called the internet that was beginning to take traction to provide a platform to automate cross-border transactions. And I'd come from an environment where we were writing manual trading tickets, putting them in a tray, and somebody would come down from the back office and take those trays up and then put the tickets into 2 or 3 different and disparate systems. And Nigel had this idea. Straight through processing was a conversation that we had regularly. Customers self-serving, automation. I mean, it was heady times. I remember there was a conversation that I remember I uttered the immortal line, "What's an API?" And of course, now the whole industry is API led, and that when we go to talk about go to market, that in itself created a problem for us. But it was interesting times, and just the ability to run previously heavily manual processes in an automated fashion, using the internet to create reach and actually deliver the service was very exciting, and we felt that we could make some big differences. And we didn't realise this at the time. I mean, as Steve Jobs always used to say, you can only join the dots up in hindsight. But we didn't realise this at the time. But we were creating the embedded finance category, because we were first to market with FX and payments available through an API. In fact, we were so early. One of the go-to-market challenges that we had were not everybody had the endpoints to consume an API. So we launched with a easily rebrandable white labelable version of user interface. And then 2012, 2013 happened. Companies like TransferWise, Cantox, Asimo, Revolut, they came through and they're like, yeah, we want to build on your API, and was like, right, we're on something here. So yeah, it was hard work, really, really hard work. And, you know, I've just dismissed the first 3 years of that business in a monologue there, but it was, that first 3 years were really hard, the hardest time we've faced, actually. And we nearly pulled down the shutters a number of times. But actually, once people started working with the API, and it's like, actually, these are the clever people. They're building products and applications on top of our API. We're just providing the infrastructure so they don't have to do the boring bits. But it turned out the utility was valuable, so it was great.
No, I was going to say in 2009, and unless my memory fails me, but yeah, that wasn't the kind of API era either. It was APIs were kind of
the API didn't come until the end of 11, beginning of 12.
Fair.
In fact, I remember it because it came in just before we got the Series A done. So the platform as it was, was running on a Mac Mini underneath the CTO's desk. And I remember in the early days, and again, probably sharing too much here, but the platform went down and we couldn't work out what was going wrong. And it turned out that the CTO had kicked out the power cable accidentally, so we had to rebooting the platform.
That is a proper comedy movie mode.
10 years, and we've got 5 nines uptime, but it was in the early days it was fun.
That would have made a great operational resilience story.
Thankfully, things are held to a higher degree of accountability and regulatory requirements nowadays. Of course, this is before AWS. You know, we in the early days we were self-hosting as well. So
yeah, that's incredible. Oh, that's a brilliant little story. Right there.
Yeah,
you
we
mentioned
go on and talk about the legacy banking infrastructure and mainframes running on COBOL and what have you. And I always used to hear that story about somewhere on Bishopsgate High Street there is a piece of real estate that is kept purely because one of the banks in question has got this black box with flashing lights and nobody knows what it does, but nobody wants to turn it on. Turns out
don't touch it.
Just in the other day.
Wow. Yeah, you mentioned go-to-market and it being difficult in those early days, and you were focusing on go-to-market, as I understand it, Steve, in CurrencyCloud. How do you go to market as an early startup in a space when, it's a new space, people aren't necessarily picking up the phone, people don't necessarily understand APIs? Like, how do you approach that across the different phases as well of that journey?
So, it's interesting. So, we didn't have a huge amount of money for marketing, and also we kind of discovering what the value proposition was. We had a belief that the way things were done were inefficient, and there were, at the time, every FX broker in the world was looking to automate their own processes. They could all see the power of the internet, and fast forward 5 years, every financial services company is a fintech. But back then, we were talking about the fact that we had a team of engineers and we could build a platform so they didn't have to. So we were initially selling to the established payments environment. We did have we had a retail proposition and a B2B proposition in the early days, but they were always a means to an end. One, to keep the lights on, and two, to showcase the underlying technology that we'd built. And then we did go on to sell the retail business, and turn the business proposition into a client of ourselves. Actually, we did the whole AWS externalized technology play, but in the early days, we were just selling the technology to established brokers that had none, which was a particular type of sales motion, because you should reach out to your network and reach out to the organisations that didn't have it. Then we started doing things like building an in-country banking network and making the delivery of the actual underlying value proposition different as well. And it wasn't until, as I say, until much later that the API came along. And then you could start having conversations about, and it's interesting, now you just have to talk about the fact we've got an API. But back then it was talking about, well, we can take our payments infrastructure and embed it into an application or a service that your customer's already using. And at the time, the counterparts on the side of the table was, what do you mean by application or service? It's like, right, okay, well, you have business customers. How do you think it would be if you could say to your business customers, you don't need our platform to interact with, you could actually execute the underlying cross-border transactions in the accounts package they're already using, or the ERP they're already using. And there is a big degree of education on the art of the possible and how you can bring together different technology packages to actually serve the needs of the customer rather than just sell your product, which is a different way of thinking. And yeah, it just kind of it evolved, and there was a lot of creative thinking in terms of how you could push this thing out the door. And then about 3 or 4 years later, once we'd built a bit of a marketing cadence and a bit of a online brand for ourselves, and people, we started getting inbound inquiries for, can we play with your API? Then we kind of knew that we were onto something. But then, of course, as the go-to-market motion matures, and you come to realise that actually you've got a very, very diverse customer base. I think at one point, much later, we had a CRO come in and said, I've analysed your customer base. You've got 39 different business segments you're servicing, with a single positioning statement, a single messaging, single piece of collateral or collateral sets, and single pricing, and no specificity on the website. So we consolidated, because I always used to joke about the fact that the best thing about having an API-led platform is you can sell it to anyone. The worst thing about having an API-led platform is you can sell it to anyone. And the problem was we did. And the brutal reality is, yes, there's an ocean of opportunity in front of you now at this point. The market had come towards us, finally. But the challenge is, you, as one of my colleagues and good friends, Dave Rees, always used to say, he used to hold us to account, you can do anything you want, but you can't do everything. And that is not just from a product development point of view, but from a go-to-market point of view as well. And what he meant by that was, we got to focus. You've got to be much more specific in what you're doing, and be much more deliberate in what you're doing, so people can really understand it. And one of the lessons that we had in our go-to-market overtures is, you can achieve so much more by doing less and doing a better job of what you do. So we focused in on a much, much smaller subset of customers, put together some very specific positioning and messaging statements, put together some specific value proposition documents, and took that to market. But because the target audience are now seeing that you're talking to them in their language about specific challenges and problems that they have, the conversion rate went through the roof. Much more appropriate, rather than just trying to be generic, one size fits all for everyone, actually being specific. On the back end, you can say to yourselves, yeah, we can sell this to anyone. That's great, but actually the last thing you should do is try and sell it to anyone. Go and dominate a market, can create demand in that market, dominate it, and then start moving into adjacencies. And that was a big learning, actually, being a lot more measured in our approach, and how we do that.
That's a really interesting point, something actually I'm taking a mental note of for Griffin, because again, being API based, the thing that you said around it's open to everyone. That's also the biggest benefit and the biggest drawback.
Yeah, I
from
mean, look,
competing.
if I was doing it again to an extent, I would
Yeah,
do something very, very similar, because you have to find what works. So you have to spray all the mud at the wall to see what sticks, but actually do it deliberately and knowingly that actually this is just an experimentation phase, and what you need to be testing for is which part of the wall has got the sticky mud. It's like, right, okay, so that's where we focus at the moment, and then we'll go back to why is it not sticking here? What do we need to change about what we're doing to but you have to experiment to see what is working, broadly speaking, and then double click on it, and then improve it and improve your efficiencies, excuse me, depending on how big that particular part of the market is how long you spend on it, and if it's a big market, there's a big opportunity for you. Otherwise, you have to then back up a little bit and explore adjacent markets, but all the time you're testing and learning and defining the signal from the noise.
Do you also then, in that phase when you were starting to focus on specific segments, did you kind of reorganize teams around focus areas? Did you kind of look at the structure internally to make that value proposition, that messaging kind of line up with the go-to-market motion?
Yeah, I'm jumping backwards and forwards on the timeline here, but ultimately where we landed was we called them pods, but we had, and there were a number of experiments and a number of initiatives we were running at this time now, and this is much later in the journey. This is the last 4 or 5 years, I'd say. But we created these bespoke, highly focused go-to-market teams that focused on discrete and highly adjacent business segments, with all the focus messaging and positioning and what have you, like I said before. But there are a couple of other things at play here as well. Firstly, we recognised that these teams needed to be cross-functional rather than just having sales and marketing in there. So what was interesting was we ended up having representation, certainly in the bigger teams that serve the bigger markets. We had representation from marketing, so like brand creation, halo marketing, lead generation, early stage sales development, actual sales guys that were running sales opportunities. Then we had customer success and account management, which was broken up into 2 functions. We had the global solutions team, we called them, which were effectively, they were product experts. They helped our customers understand the API and work with it. They were like a pre-sales function, really. They were dispassionate, not salespeople, but they were product experts in terms of how you use the API. And then we also had product managers and product directors, compliance, and in some of them we even had a FP&A, financial planning and accounting representation. But the point being is we had these highly collaborative cross-functional teams that operated in an agile manner, actually. So we had Scrum functionality, agile methodology, not just in their engineering teams, but in the go-to-market teams as well. And we were also experimenting with servant leadership at this time, and we deliberately didn't put functional leaders in those pods, but we had them as a matrix across the top. So each individual function still had their reporting lines, but actually the team that you were in, i.e. your cross-functional marketing team, your go-to-market team, that was your first team. And then your second team, your functional reporting line, that was your second team, but your focus, your priority was the go-to-market team. And it's really interesting, actually, because what happened was everyone expected the salespeople to take the lead on jostling for position and running it. But actually what happened was it was the product leaders that ended up taking the notional lead, because the product leaders were generally the most pragmatic and practical thinking and structured thinkers. So they took the lead on, and that just happened organically, actually. It was quite interesting to see. But they were all responsible for their own individual go-to-market strategy, go-to-market plan, and they all had input from us as the leadership team in terms of things that they should be thinking about, and things that need to be considered in these plans, but actually they all ran with them, and it was the right thing to do because they all felt massively empowered to run their own micro business within the organisation, and that was very powerful. Actually, that ended up being a bit of a level unlock in terms of how you move forward, and it's around about this time that CurrencyCloud really was synonymous with being the first port of call for cross-border infrastructure. We didn't necessarily win every deal, but we were certainly in the conversation for every new fintech that was coming through, every bank that wanted to go on an innovation discovery process or add a new payments capability. We were in the conversation. It was quite a remarkable turnaround from those first 3 years.
So yeah, in 20 minutes we've gone from the dungeon to the default FX player, and that's incredible. The level of when you say cross-functional, but you really did essentially take an entire slice of the business functionally and put it in these kind of go-to-market pods and get people focused. That kind of sounds. I've not heard that at all.
I took 2 minutes to describe a 3-year journey, and there were many things that we got right to begin with, but there were more that we got wrong. And the thing about building a business, and this goes for any business actually, the thing about building a business is it's never done. You never get to the end game. The end game is just to, and what we realise is the end game is just to improve incrementally. And it's the act of making, it's such a cliche to say, it's the act of failure that moves you forward. It's like, right, well, that didn't work, so what does work? Okay, well, that works, but we could possibly do it better. And it's just constant iteration. And I haven't touched on this yet, but the best thing about CurrencyCloud in the end was the culture and the environment that we had for people to do their best work. It was phenomenal, and everybody cared. Everybody wanted to do the right thing. And when you've got that luxury, and it is a luxury because I've worked in environments that haven't been that harmonious, but when you've got people that are just turning up for the check, or when you've got an environment that isn't happy and not everybody's fully motivated, or critically not everybody's aligned, that's the challenge, getting everybody aligned. Then it's different. It's difficult, and there's friction. But actually, if you've got an environment where everybody is there because they really want to be and they really believe in what you're doing. I mean, who knew that building an international payments platform would be sexy and exciting? But we were quite fortunate that the market came to us in that regard as well. But once you've got that, it's remarkably empowering, and you can then in turn empower your people to go and run with it, go and talk to the customers, go and find out what they want, and it was really good.
How do you set that up, and how do you, as founders, as the leadership, especially as you grow, what were some of the things that you did or that worked and didn't work to foster that culture, to maintain the attitude that everyone's going to kind of pick up the litter, so to speak, and everyone's going to care and not just show up.
Honestly, I'd love to say there was a predetermined playbook. I'd love to say there was a predetermined idea of how we would do this, but it's a journey. Every company that you build is a journey, and I'm sure I'm going to get corrected on the numbers here, but when I left CurrencyCloud in April 22, I want to say there were 500 people across the world at that organisation, but there must have been 1,000 more that had been through the business and shared part of their career journey with us. Some of them were fantastic contributors. Most of them were fantastic contributors, actually. Every single one of them informed us in terms of how we can be better. Even I don't want to say bad hires. Even people that were with us for a short period of time added some form of value or lesson. And look, as much as the culture was a fantastic environment towards the end, there were periods where it was really challenging. And I don't want to sound too dramatic, but there were some dark days actually where the business wasn't growing to the rate that we wanted. We had a couple of people leave, and we realised that we had to reverse engineer in some core values and structural beliefs as a business, because that was what we identified was that was missing. Because look, building an early stage, any business, but especially a regulated payments business, is really, really hard, and it's really, really demanding, and there are timelines that you miss, there are difficulties, there are disappointments on the product, there are banking relationships that go south because the bank's appetite has changed. There's all sorts of things all sorts of challenges, and you get 2 or 3 of those bad events happening in succession. As the founders of a business, you just have it in you to pick yourself up and dust yourself down, and sometimes you just assume that the people around you will do the same, but that's not the case. And you need to work on creating an environment that makes it okay to fail, makes it okay to be having a hard time, but then put in place that kind of that infrastructure and that belief system and that value system. It's like, well, okay, but this is why we're here. So we realised that in growing the business, what we'd missed is, we're focusing on building the product and building out the customer base, but actually it's just as important to focus on building out the employer brand and the excitement and the reason to be part of that group of people. So we went on a specific change management program there in terms of engineering in values and beliefs, and we started inculcating that into our daily practices and everything that we do, and we called it the clarity framework, so where we just reiterated the promises we made to our customers and to ourselves in terms of what we believe, what we're going to do, why we're doing it, and it gave us a set of lenses through which everyone looked when they were making decisions, which we then used that to then feed into the servant leadership and empowering our people to push the decision-making process as close to the customer as possible. Because what we recognised was that when people feel like they're an essential part of the machine, and actually the things that they do and the things that they decide have a real impact, that's when magic starts happening actually. And one thing I learned is you hire the right people. You empower them. You set the objective. Tell them where you want them to get to. Tell them what you need them to do. In certain circumstances, you might need to give some guidance in terms of how you want it done. But largely, if you're hiring the right people, they're there to tell you how to do it. Again, I think I'm quoting Steve Jobs there again as well. Actually, hire smart people and get out of the way. Don't tell them what to do. That's really stupid because then you become the bottleneck. But by setting that clarity framework, by giving people the set of lenses through which to see the decision making criteria, it's empowering, and that is a way of scaling your culture. That is a way of scaling your beliefs and your aspirations for the business. We came through that dark period, and we ended up having a company culture that people would rave about actually, and people would get very excited about the way that we structured the organisation in the interview process. You start talking about the cross-functional, no leadership, go-to-market strategy. You start talking about the whole servant leadership capability and how we are there to take inspiration from them. It was really eye-opening stuff actually.
I've heard this firsthand in events like Money 2020, or just here and there, or ex CurrencyCloud people that we've had join Griffin. That yeah, it's kind of been a North Star in terms of that culture and that feeling that, yeah, we're moving somewhere where it's exciting. It's yeah, you make some really interesting points around bringing decision making closer to the customer, and I guess that kind of closes that information gap that naturally happens as you scale and as there's more people involved. Well, I could talk about this for a long time and go into it.
I could bang on it for hours as well. It was a really special thing to be part of, actually, and actually, it was the people that made it so special. People say, "How did you come up with this?" Well, we didn't. It just kind of, you like the blue touch paper, but actually, it's the interaction that you have with other people. It's the interaction that you have with your colleagues. If you've got the right group of people, all facing in the right direction, and you've got alignment, these things, they don't happen on their own. You have to direct them. But the organic development of the principles, the processes, the values. It's wonderful to watch it unfold. Again, I've summarised it very, very briefly in a matter of minutes, but it happened at length. It wasn't, there wasn't a magic wonder or anything. These things took years in case of some of the initiatives, but it was definitely a wonderful, wonderful part of my career, that's for sure.
Yeah, I bet. No, it sounds pretty special. What has it been like transitioning to the VC world?
Look, there's no question the investors and entrepreneurs are different. I should add that most fund managers are small organisations, and therefore, by definition, entrepreneurial anyway. And building a venture business is far more hard work than I realised, and I have a whole new level of respect for the investors. I spent my time at CurrencyCloud underestimating quite what you have to go through. But obviously, I joined the venture community in possibly the hardest environment that venture has seen, certainly post-financial crisis. But that's a whole other podcast, I'm sure. If you have the right investment partner, then obviously you're aligned on objectives. What is your plan for the business? Where do you want to take this? How can we support you? At Volution, we have a very narrow mandate. We invest at a certain stage between Series A and Series B. We think there's a big gap in the funding market there. We think the funding environment is, certainly in the UK and Europe, it's very, very siloed. There's a lot of cash available in the early stages, but not so much focus on the growth stage. You don't really have this problem in the US, but certainly in the UK and Europe, that gap exists. It was very true when we were trying to do our Series B at CurrencyCloud, and it's still there now. So we provide extension capital to help our portfolio companies maintain the momentum and increase momentum, actually, into a more meaningful Series B round with the kind of investors you want on your cap table. And we're all ex-operators. I joke about us being recovering founders, but we're all recovering founders ourselves. So we have our own expertise to draw on, but I run the growth platform. So we have a network of experts, whether it's mentors, entrepreneurs in residence, other exited founders, professional services firms, to help portfolio companies navigate the landmines in front of them. I'd love to say we help them see round corners, but we can't do that. But we help. We just basically help them go faster and help them think things through. So sometimes we don't have the answers. Sometimes we do. But it's a very active engagement that we have, and it's that part that I really enjoy. Actually, really enjoy working with the early stage environment again, because obviously building any business, you go through on a journey. You've got an early stage business and then a late stage business, and as the business matures to the point where you're about to be acquired by a big payments company like Visa, you're necessarily very, very corporate, but also your go-to-market conversations. You're selling into enterprise. You're selling into big global banks. It's a completely different motion to the art of the possible, the wouldn't it be cool if we could do this kind of conversations in the early stages of the ecosystem. And it's that enthusiasm and energy that's intoxicating. That I think sums up venture. Actually, you're investing in businesses. You're investing in people that believe they are going to change the world, or certainly their little corner of it. So yeah, in many ways, from that point of view, it's like coming home for me. But in other ways, the investment environment is very, very different. People forget that VC firms, or any investment business for that matter, it's a business, and they're there to make money, and they make money by protecting their interests and protecting their LPs' interests, and holding founders to account. So there's a tension between that and then the role that I play as an operating partner in terms of holding the founders' hands and getting to know the founding teams and the broad leadership teams and being more collaborative and helpful. There is a yin and a yang, I think. It's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. What obviously today the world is like moving so quickly. I've been vibe coding this weekend, and it's kind of terrifying how far you can go with this stuff. Things are moving very, very quickly. What advice do you often find yourself giving to portfolio companies or founders in general that, about building a startup, an early stage company today in 2025?
I think it depends on the context of the conversation. But look, to your point, it's an entirely different environment now to that we founded CurrencyCloud in. In fact, it's an entirely different environment now to the one even as recently as 12 months ago. It's changing so quickly. The advent of AI just makes it, in theory, makes it so much easier to do so much more quickly. And I always think you need to be very, very careful when you're talking about a new technology. People run around the payments ecosystem in particular. We're really guilty of it with blockchain and distributed ledgers. Everyone was talking about, we use blockchain to do this and DLT to do that. And like, great, but what's the problem you're solving? And for me, it's all about focusing on the problem statement. Who has the problem? What is the quantum of the problem? And what is the solution that you're offering? Because, and again, another key learning that we had at CurrencyCloud in the sales motion, but this is the same across any business that you're building. Your customer doesn't care about you or your product. They don't care at all. You can have the best relationship in the world, but at the end of the day, it's a business relationship. They don't really care about you. All they care about is the problem that they have in front of them right now and how you can help them solve it. And technology, whether it is blockchain as it was 7 or 8 years ago, whatever it was, or AI as it is now, all that does is enable business models that you can then operate to serve specific problems in a new and innovative way. Perhaps it's more efficiently or faster, or perhaps you're tying together solutions to various problems or whatever. And I remember one of the limiting factors we had at CurrencyCloud was our ability to hire good engineers quickly enough so that we could actually move the roadmap at the pace that we wanted to. And at one point, there are companies like TransferWise, Revolut, Facebook, Amazon, all the big tech guys. Engineers were the new rock stars, and you were having to pay ridiculous amounts of money just to get a junior engineer, never mind an experienced engineer. And that naturally became a limiting factor, and it reduced our ability to progress our roadmap at the speed that we wanted to. And that wasn't just unique to us, everyone was finding that. But now with AI and things like Lovable and Cursor, you've got entrepreneurs that are spinning up MVPs and and prototypes and MVPs over the course, as you say, over the course of a weekend. So I think, interestingly, that's going to lead to even more fragmentation. I remember our CEO, Mike Laven, he was always very avuncular and very sage, but I remember going to a conference with him once, and we were talking about looking out across the exhibition hall, and he said, there are 100 payment companies here. In 5 years' time, 90 of them won't exist. And what he was commenting on is look, this is always a fragmented ecosystem, and it's going to become more fragmented. There's always going to be startups, there's always going to be roll-ups, there's always going to be M&A strategy. And there are going to be firms that execute better than others. But that's even more compounded now. I think going forward, there are going to be more and more startups. There's a lot of people getting overexcited talking about solopreneurs building billion-dollar businesses. I'm not sure that's possible. I'd love to be proven wrong on that, and I think it's a really interesting academic exercise. But I refer to my points about the value of the human interaction and the human processes. But I think there are going to be more and more organisations that spin up. Building the technology isn't going to be the limiting factor anymore. And what is going to be increasingly important is a clear, and I'm talking my own book here because of my experiences, but I think a clear understanding of the problem in front of you and how you solve that and how you demonstrate value to your customer. And is that repeatable? Is that something that many customers want? And of course, one of the other challenges is building a defensible moat, because technology is no longer your moat.
Oof, what a world we live in. This is going to be a fun few years. And to your point about engineers being the new rock stars, I think I saw a meme the other day where it was saying Cristiano Ronaldo cost 80 million and Meta has just hired an OpenAI engineer for 100.
Yeah. So look, I mean, obviously, so there are things that AI is very good at. And there's a lot of talk at the moment about engineers being made redundant or marketing functions. That's something that I've got former colleagues in marketing that are finding it very, very difficult, because there are some of the functions that are just rinse and repeat and just process led. That's
Agents.
Easily replaced by AI. But what you can't account for, what you can't legislate for, is quality and taste. And understanding the application, and I mean that in terms of how you would use the thing that you're building rather than the thing you're building, the application of that product. And I don't think AI is going to get there. So it's a lot. It's the artistic element. As Ben Affleck said, the difference between a craftsman and an artist is a craftsman does the thing very well, but the artist knows when to stop.
Yeah.
Good interview, actually.
Yeah. Oh, Steve, we 1 hour wasn't enough. We could have easily gone on, but you're a busy man. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for the honesty as well. I think especially founders listening will appreciate the fact that you go into those dark days. You talk about the fact that it's not a linear kind of, success journey. There are ups and downs, and it's grit, determination, and that kind of human team spirit that pulls people.
Grit and grind. That's all it is. Grit and grind. Grit and grind, and make sure you've got the best people you can find around you. Yeah. Because it's not all about you. That's the other lesson, actually. It is not all about you. In fact, it is not at all about you. That's a whole other conversation as well.
Next episode. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you.
Fun, Mo. Thank you.